Alright, the plan for today is working on the soundtrack for next book. So Kyren, book 5, Kyren, Fall of the Light. My goal is, I don't really want to call it like a full soundtrack, but I do want to do some instrumentals, have a little bit of orchestration in there, maybe do a couple of new songs for it. The previous soundtracks were like new instrumentals mixed with some previously existing songs, and I made like soundtrack versions of them. But for this one, I want to kind of shrink it down, condense it, and just, throw some stuff at the wall, see what sticks. So going to be working on a few beats for that. Going to work on a couple songs for that, and then try to, get it sequenced out to see what fits the feel of the book. So with this one, this is the original Kyren theme. I've always envisioned the Kyren books eventually turning into something, on the scale of like, Marvel films, or to not even go into live action and just remain in animation. Something like, say, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, like a nice, like long, year-over-year expanding series, right? And when I first had the idea back in like 2018, when I wrote the first book, I was like, she needs her own like hero theme. Like Spider-Man has his theme, Superman has his theme, different songs that play when these heroes step on the screen or they're present in any media. So I wanted her to have her own theme. So back then, that was when I first really got into trying to produce a lot heavier and more consistently, because I wanted to know, like, I own this theme song. I play this theme song out by hand. I used to have an old M-Audio keyboard, and I played all of this out. I studied, I went to school for music and engineering and everything, but the music theory side, I didn't really dive too deep into in terms of playing. So once I sat down with this, back in 2018, I went back, I studied through, I learned how to, arrange a lot better, I'm not going to say a lot better, but differently, because it was different than arranging, a hip-hop song or R&B song, trying to, catch the feel of, this powerful character and have the music accompany that feeling. So this one is the 5th, since it's the 5th book, this is the 5th rendition I've made. You can go back and hear the different title themes on the old soundtracks, soundtracks from Kyren 1 through 4, and each one is a little different. The key might change, the tempo might change, the instruments might change, but they all kind of reflect the tone of the book itself. So this one is somewhat of a return to form. It mirrors the first one, the first theme, much more. It's much more powerful, much brighter, much more triumphant compared to the previous ones. So with this one, I'm working on I wouldn't call it a theme song for this specific villain, but it is the song that I'm kind of attributing to his presence. I kind of added a lot more hip-hop influence to this one, because in the previous ones I feel like there was a lot of orchestration and not a lot of percussion. There was a lot of focus on making sure I did, the horns and the strings and the woodwinds, making sure I did all of that correctly, that I kind of forgot to add the elements of percussion to it, specifically hip-hop influence to it. Not that hip-hop will be the only influence that is attached to this soundtrack, but for this one in particular, I felt like it kind of matched the direction that I wanted to go, because even without the drums, even without the drums, it's still got the same. It's still got the same energy that I was looking for, right? But with the drums, I feel like I'm able to kind of bring home the direction that I really want for it to take. Like this section without drums and, having the drums come in, come out, I feel like as you're reading through the book and you kind of see what this moment is in the book, contextually the music choices will start to make sense. Alright, so with this one I wanted something like, how do I put it? So when I was writing this section of the book, the scene that kept playing in my mind was the club scene from one of the Blade movies. I don't remember which Blade movie. It might have been Blade 2. I'm not sure. But during one of those films, Blade walks into the club and there's this track going, and I distinctly remember it from when I was a kid and hearing, "Listen up, all you mother," and they cursed, right? But hearing that phrase kept popping in my head as I was making this beat for the soundtrack. And when I was writing that section of the book, I just envisioned like the battle that's taking place, the fight that's happening in that chapter. It reminded me of that, where it's just like it's a very, obviously I don't have any visualizations of this stuff except within my own head, but in my mind it was a very well choreographed, high intensity fight sequence, right? Starting with, diving out of a ship, spaceship, starship, however you want to, phrase it. Diving out of one of those, fighting your way to the ground, land on the ground. It's a lot of I don't really know how to say it without going into spoiler territory, but the lesser villains of the chapter, there's, hundreds and thousands of them. So I just envisioned this really intense fight sequence, but I didn't want to go for a trap feel. I wanted it to be kind of clubby, where it was like high energy, high octane kind of feel for that specific moment. With this beat, originally it started out as one that I was going to use for an album for 2025, but it fit the tone of what I wanted for this scene, right? And the song idea that I originally had for it didn't really fit the narrative of the story anymore. So I scrapped that song idea. Really like the beat still. If I used it, it would be just kind of like a one-off thing. It wouldn't really be an actual song. But yeah, the beat itself ended up speaking to me a lot more than the song idea that I had originally created for it. So now, I stripped it back, kind of reorganized it to make it fit the soundtrack a little better. And now, this is what we are left with. I would say it's probably the most like hip-hop sounding beat Obviously, there's the West Coast influence to it, but it's probably the most like, oh, this should have been on an album sounding beat that I'll have on the project. Everything else was kind of created specifically with the novel soundtrack in mind. Alright, I went back to this one. The beat I had already did, but I wanted to add some vocal samples, so I wrote a hook to it so I could sample out my own hook. So I'm gonna leave the hook, but it is just for the soundtrack. It's not like a completed song or anything. I just wrote the hook so I would have some ideas for what to pull from for audio, for a vocal sample to chop up. So I gotta, make it sound old. When I sample vocals, sometimes it's from me, sometimes it's from, my peers. It's very rare that I'll go out and just get like a really big mainstream song and sample that, because I don't want to go through the hassle of clearance. I want to make sure I own everything when I'm sampling stuff in. So for this one, that's the main reason why I went. I didn't have to have the vocal sample or the hook. The beat was fine for the idea and for the placement within the soundtrack for the narrative. But I felt like to kind of bring home the feel, I wanted to have a few words in there, because the way I envision it in my mind is like when this scene plays out, like if it were a movie, there would be the instrumental portion of it, and then there would also be some of the hook kind of, spread amongst that clip. So that's kind of why I went the way that I went with this one. I haven't mixed any of it yet because I literally just did it in between the cuts of the clips. But I did get it written. Yeah. I wish I could write a letter to make me feel better about myself. I keep turning down the hell from you, 'cause I don't know what else. I wish I could write a letter. I can't keep running from myself. I can't keep turning down the hell from you, but I don't know what else to do. So that's the direction that I'm going for the hook, and then I took some of that, flipped it back. I wish I could write a letter, because I did some backing vocals. I wish I could write a letter. And then, you'll see how it turns out. But that's kind of the direction that I wanted to go for this one. I'm kind of trying to touch on a few different genres for the soundtrack. I want, of course, the orchestrated sound. I want, some hip hop. I want some pop influence. Even some funk influence in some areas, because in the Kyren universe, my music does exist. The Kyren universe is alternate universe than our own present one, obviously, but it is more of, a future timeline type situation where I existed at one point in time in this universe. All of my CDs for as long as I continue to live and make music will exist in this universe, because Kyren has a old case of my CDs, and I make sure to never say how many CDs she owns. That way, if I decide to write a book 20 years from now and I make 200 more albums or something, then I'll be able to pull one of those albums from 20 years in the future into these books and say that this album existed at this time in this book. So it's kind of a way to pseudo immortalize myself and continue to keep all of my different art forms interconnected. So like my original 10 years worth of albums from 2013 to 2023, all those albums exist in their own timeline of like music timelines. But that story exists inside the Kyren universe, and some of the stories that take place on the albums take place in the future during the Kyren stuff. So it's too much to get into for just behind the scenes for the soundtrack thing. But if I ever get the opportunity to really sit and talk about it, it's so deep and it's so interconnected, and I just love the storytelling aspect of a lot of this stuff. So for this one, obviously you can hear the heavy Michael Jackson reference. I don't know. I didn't really intend for it to go this direction when I was writing the book. But as I started working on the beat, this specific scene in the book, it just like that feel that Michael Jackson style of songs has, where it's kind of like energy invoking and you know kind of pushes you to move a bit, right? It kind of made sense in context with the book. In that specific section of the book, during, you know, again, trying not to talk spoilers for it, but when you finally see the chapter that this beat is connected to, it makes a lot more sense, especially once you see the title of the song. It's kind of like the penultimate song, I believe is what it's called, like right before the end, right before that last song on there. So yeah, I definitely wanted something like this to, you know, like I said, it pulls so much inspiration from these different genres, where I wanted everything to kind of have its own moment to shine. If you listen really close, you can hear some of Kyren's theme song intertwined into this beat, which kind of gives you a idea of who's at the center of this moment in the book. So okay, so this is one that's a lot more laid back, very much acoustic. I didn't add any drums to this one. I am toying around with the idea of potentially doing, you know, different versions of some songs. So like one track, it might be, you know, just the instrumental version, and then the version with the vocal sample. And then this one, for example, is a full song. I wrote the entirety of this one out and recorded it just now. But I'm thinking of doing, you know, the instrumental version of it and the actual song version of it, and just, you know, filling out the soundtrack track list in that manner. I haven't mixed anything yet. I literally just recorded. I don't like to do all the mixing the same day I record, so I can kind of give my ears a break. But this is where we're at currently. Some of it probably will change by the time the soundtrack comes out, but you know, that's the beauty of like seeing ideas kind of, you know, come to life over time. Because this section of the book, it's towards the end of the book, like within the last couple chapters, and it's just it's an emotional scene, but I don't want it to be like, I want there to be a bit of potential positivity through the sadder ending, right? It's not like a you know, incredibly sad ending or an incredibly happy ending. It's a, you know, without going into spoilers, it's an ending that is real, I guess is the best way to put it. Sometimes there are incredibly happy endings, sometimes there are incredibly sad endings, but oftentimes it's just an ending that's the reality of the situation at hand. So I wanted the song for that section to kind of invoke some of that emotion, where you could listen to it and feel a lot sadder than the next person, or you could listen to it and feel more hopeful than the next person. But the true nature of it is somewhat of a kind of realism or realist middle ground, you know. I do think for this one I'm going to do I do want to leave it acoustic, right? Just have the guitars. I want to have the guitar version, the instrumental version, and possibly a version with drums. But I want to play around with the drums first, because I don't want them to, you know, take away from the feel of the song. So I am gonna experiment with how they sound. I had messed around yesterday when I was working on the beat with what drums would kind of fit it. And I wanted drums that kind of were in the realm of like country-esque drums. I didn't want really, you know, super trappy or hip-hoppy drums, but I also didn't want to, you know, deviate too far from my roots to the point where it felt forced. You know, I didn't want that either. What is this? Let's see. You left me stranded. How could you leave me behind? Yeah, see, it's like when I tried some of them, this was the drum pattern that I had tried the other day, and that was before I wrote it, so I wasn't too sure what direction I was going to go, but hearing them now, it's not really the direction that I want to keep it. I don't want it to have a super high energy feel. So I'll probably leave the drums out of this one.